Watch right now on the Front News Project Panic. In Russia, the Russian Ministry of Defense has reported that 500 Ukrainian armed forces drones struck the Russian military-industrial complex. Putin is moving troops and air defense systems into temporarily occupied Crimea. What is the Kremlin preparing for? And also, the elite presidential FSB regiment on the Ukrainian front. The Kremlin maniac is sending his own people to slaughter. Watch fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his gang unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom continues. Greetings, this is Front News. I'm Vladimir Timoshenko. For the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war. It's brought to you by our journalists from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then, let's begin. And we're starting right away with exclusive material. The Ukrainian army is now considered one of the most powerful in the world. Putin's Russia, which once claimed to be the world's second strongest army, is now feeling this very acutely. And it's not just about the size of the Ukrainian army, but also about its quality and ability to come up with unconventional solutions. While the Kremlin was pulling together all its available air defense systems to protect the sacred parade in Moscow, the Ukrainian armed forces redirected their efforts toward a production facility unique to the enemy's military-industrial complex, and it seems they struck something that existed in a single copy. Moreover, as TSN Week correspondent Oksana Radionova claims, they've identified another sector after the oil industry, which they had almost completely shut down. All the details. Let's watch.
For 2 days straight, wave after wave, more than 500 Ukrainian drones attacked the Russian military-industrial complex. This was the largest and longest raid since the start of the full-scale invasion. There had never been such a large-scale incursion before.
This is the tactic of 1,000 cuts.
We didn't have these capabilities even a year ago.
A constant, unyielding presence in the enemy's airspace, always there at all times, non-stop.
And our forces struck not only at the very heart of Koshay in Moscow. They also targeted the most sensitive spots, facilities that the Russians have only one of.
We are simply capable of delivering sensitive blows to the Russians.
Here it comes again. Do you hear that sound? There it is.
They won't be able to shoot it down over the fiber. Where are you looking?
Our enemies let our drones slip through in the capital of Mordovia, Saransk. There they struck the first and only plant for the production of fiber optic systems. Its production capacity is 4 million kilometers of fiber per year. This is where they make fiber optic cable for enemy frontline drones, so halting production should help our guys on the front lines. Cable and optical cable arrived in Saransk.
In Tal, Russia. Now, this is the only plant that supplies fiber optic cable on a large scale for the front, specifically for the Russian army. According to available information, the plant has suspended its operations for a certain period of time. Is that a car coming?
Everything's fine. Everything's okay.
At least 7 explosions were counted by locals at the Basalt plant in the Moscow region, Dana, the main defense enterprise in Russia, where weapons and ammunition are produced for all branches of the military.
The area is burned out. What an idiot.
Blazing Alloy is the only enterprise in Russia that designs and develops multiple launch rocket systems and munitions for the Solntsepyak. It was here that the Grads, Uragans, and Smerch systems were produced. This is one of the top priority weapons manufacturing enterprises in Russia. In Tula, our forces also attacked the Instrument Design Bureau, one of the flagships of the Russian military-industrial complex, which is engaged in the development of high-precision guided weapons.
Now Ukraine is trying to destroy such enterprises, ones that have no equivalence within the Russian Federation itself. Here we see the tactic, the strategy, to destroy enterprises in Russia that are essentially one of a kind.
And this is how the Kamaz plant in Tatarstan was ablaze. Overall, since the beginning of the year, Ukrainian kamikaze drones have attacked more than 24 defense industry enterprises in Russia. To fend off our UAVs, the Russians have deployed their alligators with which means the complexity of drone operations is increasing.
So it's necessary to avoid not only the anti-aircraft missile system positions, but also to make sure you don't enter the operational area of helicopters.
In addition, 2 military airfields were under our sights. The much-publicized Kubinka Air Base in the Moscow region, home to the regular participants of the Victory Parade, Putin's Knights, and Shaykovka, in the Kaluga region, which is a base for 2 22M bombers with missile storage facilities.
At Shaykovka, in addition to the storage site for Kh-22 missiles, the storage facilities for fuel and lubricants were also hit.
Hiding from our drones and missiles, the Russians relocated their Tu-22s to the Belaya base near Irkutsk, 5,000 kilometers away. Such a maneuver, firstly, is a blow to their flight resources, and secondly, they won't be able to strike from there. That's them hiding their planes.
In this way, they are hiding their aircraft from strikes on angles. But it's unlikely these planes will pose a threat to us from Irkutsk Oblast. It's just too far, 5,000 kilometers. And since they carry missiles on external mounts, in reality, they simply don't have enough range to fly there and back.
It was also affected by the fact that air defense systems were moved to Moscow. After all, Putin is more important than the airfields. To protect Moscow on May 9th, according to various reports, they transferred almost 200 air defense units there. They even put the experimental S-500, which is the Russian equivalent of the latest generation American Patriot, on duty.
From the Far East, which is close to Japan, they are pulling S-300 and S-400 air defense systems closer to the European part of Russia. In the Far East, they are now putting up decoys instead.
Our drones have grounded Russian civil aviation. Hundreds of cancelled flights in Russia shut down not only the 3 main airports in the capital, which meant Putin's guests could easily have missed the Victory Day celebration, but even the airport in Perm, which is more than 200 kilometers from our border, was closed. Russian aviation and no stop.
Russian aviation already has problems with its aircraft. And now we're also starting to control the flights of Russian planes. The losses for the Russians are quite significant. 60,000 passengers have piled up in the airports. Just the financial losses alone have already exceeded the cost of at least a tenth of the drones launched.
It was Nikolai Gogol who once said that fools and roads are Russia's main problems. Without aviation, it's 9,000 kilometers from Moscow to Sakhalin, a week-long journey. And that's if the road hasn't been washed out. So controlling regions over such distances is extremely difficult, and airline bankruptcy is looming. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars, according to our aviation expert. And during the drone attacks, entire Russian regions were left without mobile service and internet. And that also means significant losses, and everything they've lost will never become bullets or weapons for Putin.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Orikhiv and Pridniprovsky fronts. The enemy, Irna, is becoming more aggressive here as well. On the Orikhiv front, our defenders repelled 3 enemy assaults near Stepny. The enemy also carried out airstrikes on Stepnohursk and Kamyansk. On the Pridniprovsk front, our defenders successfully stopped with one enemy attempt to approach our positions. They are destroying enemy infantry with a 152mm gun. On that same Orikhiv front, the aggressors are trying to advance with small assault groups, but they are being stopped by both our drones and our artillerymen. Thanks to the accuracy of Ukrainian gunners, enemy depots, UAV stations, and Russian army equipment are all going up in flames. The enemy is constantly hunting our vehicles several times a day, dropping bombs on all the groves around Orikhiv. TSN correspondent Ruslan Yarmolyuk saw the conditions in which our artillerymen are working in the Zaporizhzhia region. We present his exclusive report to your attention.
Sometimes the morning starts with coffee, and sometimes with incoming fire. It depends.
Our artillery is vulnerable on the front line to enemy aircraft and drones.
It's necessary to camouflage the vehicle. That's the most important thing, because right now there are a lot of drones, especially FPVs, which are carrying some serious explosives. And they don't come one at a time, but in pairs. So one breaks through and the second one flies right into the target.
The enemy is searching for where to strike. Enemy high-altitude UAVs are constantly in the air.
We have no truce. If we give them a truce, tomorrow they'll be here.
The enemy is advancing from the occupied Kapan positions, trying to break through from the flank near Robotyne.
53 shells. That wasn't even in a day. It was almost all at once. Usually we fire about 10 shells on average.
The enemy moves in small groups and gathers in the ruins of houses in front of our line. That's when heavy artillery comes into play.
It varies. It happens with equipment, infantry and UAVs. At different targets. Whatever target comes up, that's the one we fire at.
Pavel had no experience in artillery. He learned on the job, right in the field during the war.
A shell weighs 45 to 50 kilograms, and the casing is about 20, maybe a bit more. I think everyone's backs have suffered over these 3 years.
They only fire during the day when it's absolutely necessary and there's a threat to our infantry. Fire quickly and then camouflage. The enemy quickly detects the exits. Then everything they've got in their arsenal comes flying our way.
After we fired for about 10 minutes, maybe even less, they start shooting at us too.
The old Soviet self-propelled gun is twice as old as Dmitry. Dmitry is the youngest in the crew, but he's learning to fight quickly.
But I think that psychologically it is difficult to get used to the fact that they shoot every day, cabs fly over you, they fall every day. At 5 in the evening every day, at 10 in the evening and at 5 in the morning, they fly constantly. Drones are constantly in the sky. It's hard to get used to this, but over time you do.
The secret to the machine's survivability depends on a friendly crew, when everyone has each other's back.
We fired 5 shells at one target, hit it with the third and fourth. The first 2 are for adjustment.
The enemy infantry was destroyed. The enemy's advance was stopped. The gun is being pulled back and hidden in the dense forest until the next order to fight.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the blazing Pokrovsky sector of the front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. On the Pokrovsky direction, since the beginning of this day, the enemy has tried to advance in the areas of the settlements of Staronikolaevka, Yelizavetovka, Mirolyubovka, Roman Lisovka, Zverevo, Kotlino, Udachnoye, Kotliarovka, and Andreevka. Our defenders have stopped 46 enemy assault actions. Another 5 clashes are still ongoing. The most important topic of this week is that the situation in Crimea has seriously escalated. The Russians seem to sense something. In fact, almost all Russian air defense has been moved from Rubliovka and Red Square to the temporarily occupied peninsula. That is, the Russian Federation is leaving military facilities in other regions exposed. At the same time, for the first time, units of the elite Presidential Regiment of the Russian FSB have been spotted at the front in Ukraine. Their Russian command redeployed them to the area near Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region, where Russia has been fighting unsuccessfully for at least a year. In addition, the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces used strike drones to destroy a Russian Buk M3 surface-to-air missile system that was covering enemy troops on the ground. A Uragan-1 multiple launch rocket system was also destroyed. Now we will show you this fiery footage.
In these frames, you can see a strike on a bridge in the Kursk region in the settlement of Zvanoye. This happened during the evacuation of a truck that got stuck at the crossing due to logistics. The footage was taken from the phone of a Russian soldier. Meanwhile, as Russian territories and their people suffer, the occupiers are bringing air defense systems into temporarily occupied Crimea.
Among the priority areas where the Russians are strengthening and will always continue to strengthen their air defense systems, Moscow comes first. This, of course, also includes St. Petersburg and Crimea. This allows them to influence, among other things, the theater of military operations on the territory of our country during the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Apparently, Russia has no intention of stopping the war. The Economist reports that the aggressor country is actively ramping up the production of military weapons, especially drones. Ukrainian intelligence officers managed to find out about a new S-8000 Banderol missile, which is being developed by the Russian sanctioned company Kronstadt.
Apparently, Iran has transferred certain technologies to the Russians. It seems that the Russians have managed to supply the missing components which are not produced by the Russian Federation, bypassing the sanctions. This raises the question of what is most important to do in order to reduce the number of Shaheds. I'm talking specifically about production. This is about monitoring the enforcement of those sanctions that have been imposed on various sectors of the Russian Federation's economy. Accordingly, production volumes will actually decrease.
Whatever the Russians do, any reports of success are simply fabricated. For example, on Monday, May 12th, Russia claimed that they had supposedly captured the village of Otliarovka in the Donetsk region. The operational strategic group Kortitsia immediately refuted this information, stating that fighting is still ongoing in Otliarovka.
Russian attempts to advance toward the Dnipropetrovsk region are nothing new. That's the first point. Secondly, I think it's more accurate to say that Russia, and let's remember the strategic goal of the Russian Federation is the complete occupation of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. So in fact, Russia is moving toward the southern, I'm speaking conditionally, southern administrative borders of the Donetsk region. It is precisely the south of the Donetsk region that serves as the direction toward Dnipropetrovsk. Therefore, accordingly, Russia will scale up all its movements, including in the information space.
For the first time, units of Russia's elite FSB Presidential Regiment have reportedly been spotted on the front lines in Ukraine. These units report directly to the Russian dictator and, to put it bluntly, are trained to hold the door open for him not to fight. But that didn't stop Putin from deciding to deploy them near Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region, where Russia has been fighting unsuccessful battles for at least a year.
It is quite likely that this was actually done for some kind of propaganda purpose. And if the Russians themselves say so, that would be confirmation of it.
Ukraine is also strengthening its army to fight the enemy. The 118th Mechanized Brigade demonstrated the use of the Ukrainian RPG-16 flamethrower for close combat. Its main targets are enemy personnel, equipment, and structures. In this footage, the Special Operations Forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces used strike drones to destroy a Russian Buk M3 surface-to-air missile system that was covering enemy troops on land. A Uragan-1 multiple launch rocket system was also destroyed. In addition, Ukrainian defenders used drones equipped with grenade launchers for the first time. It is claimed that this marks a new level in the use of drones. Now, drones can not only conduct reconnaissance and drop munitions, but also provide full-fledged fire support. In the United Kingdom, the head of a Russian spy network has been sentenced to nearly 11 years in prison. This refers to Bulgarian Orlin Rusev, who acted on the instructions of Austrian Jan Marsalek, the former chief operating officer of Wirecard. The group organized by Rusev and Marsalek was monitoring anti-Kremlin journalists in Europe, for which they received sentences ranging from 5 to nearly 11 years in prison. Marsalek managed to escape to Russia.
Now let's take a detailed look at the operational situation on the Lyman and Siversk sectors of the front. Let's be honest, these are sacred targets for Putin and his gang. Accordingly, the situation here is extremely tense as well. On the Lyman direction, Russian invaders attacked the positions of the defense forces 21 times near the settlements of Novaya Krugliakovka, Lozovaya, Novoyegorovka, Grekovka, Kolodyazi, Yampolovka, Redkodub, and towards Grigorievka. 2 clashes are still ongoing. In the Siversk direction, our defenders repelled 4 attacks by the occupying forces near Verkhnekamenskoye and Belogorovka. Another clash is still ongoing. Another area of continuous fighting on the Lyman direction is the settlement of Yampolovka. It is there that the enemy is trying to establish a bridgehead in order to cross to the western bank of the Chorny-Zherebets River. Ukrainian positions here are being stormed by units of the enemy's 25th Combined Arms Army, which shows no regard for the lives of its own soldiers, and the intensity of the attacks does not decrease. How exactly is this happening? how do the defenders of the armed forces of Ukraine stop the advance of Russian war criminals? This is precisely what the following report by TSN correspondent Yulia Kiriyenko is about.
Frankly, countless numbers of eliminated Russian soldiers lie in the fields, forest belts, and trenches along the line of contact. This is the result of the effective work of Ukrainian defenders in the Lyman direction. It would seem that such losses should definitely put an end to any further enemy assault attempts. But Russian commanders keep sending new groups of assault troops to their deaths again and again.
They charge straight ahead. They keep charging straight ahead all the time. If they have the opportunity, they push forward. Basically, it's just forward and forward, that's it.
These are the soldiers of the 66th Mechanized Brigade named after Prince Mstislav the Brave. They are defending the Lyman direction, currently one of the most difficult sectors of the front.
The Russians haven't been ordered to stop, so to speak, the active phase, at least not at this particular moment in time, as far as we know.
Breaking through to Lyman in order to start putting pressure on Sloviansk from the northeast is the occupiers' long-term goal. To achieve this, enemy headquarters are intensifying assaults on two neighboring sections of the front in the Lyman sector. The Russians have achieved minimal tactical successes here as they have reached the line of Katerinivka and Novomikhailivka and have engaged in fierce fighting for the small villages of Novoy and Lipov, north of Lyman.
The morning seemed to start quietly, but then things began to escalate. The rain stopped, FPV drones, incoming fire, mortars, and at the beginning, as we were landing there.
Not even the ceasefire declared by the Kremlin itself stopped the Russians in this sector. Ukrainian soldiers say that on the Lyman front, it didn't work for even a minute.
For example, there was supposed to be a truce. They used it to lay down pontoon bridges and amass their forces. It was just a bit quieter, not like it usually is. But there was no truce.
Another area of continuous fighting on the Lyman front is the village of Yampolivka. There, the occupiers are trying to establish a foothold in order to cross to the western bank of the Chorny Zerebets River. Ukrainian positions here are being stormed by units of the enemy's 25th Combined Army, with no decrease in intensity, and they are not sparing their soldiers at all. The Russians have also increased pressure on Lyman itself. The shelling of the city is becoming more and more intense over time, and it is precisely in this direction that all Russian activity from neighboring Kupiansk has shifted. From there, the Russians have even redeployed separate motorized rifle regiments of the 1st Tank Army to the Lyman area. It is clear that all of this is being done to destroy the Ukrainian Defense Forces' logistical routes as quickly as possible and to push Ukrainian defenders as far west as possible ahead of the likely negotiations in Istanbul.
Now let's move to the Kramatorsk and Toretsk directions of the front. The Russian world continues here as well, to destroy, kill, and maim. In the Kramatorsk direction, the enemy attacked our defenders' positions 8 times, near the settlements of Chasiv Yar, Shiaitie, Iwaka, Hrihorivka, Bilahora, and Kurdyumivka. At the moment, one battle is still ongoing. 19 times, the Russians stormed the positions of Ukrainian units in the Toretsk direction, in the areas of Toretsk, Krimske, and Hlivitsia. All enemy attacks were repelled by our defenders. They pretend to be civilians. Putin's soldiers on the Orikhiv front change into civilian clothes in villages destroyed by their own bombings along the line of contact. In Robotine, a Ukrainian drone spotted a mortar firing at our positions and 2 young men in civilian clothing. Despite this Russian disguise, Ukrainian pilots destroyed the target. The next report by TSN correspondent Ishu Ruslan Yarmolyuk is about the work of pilots who go days without seeing daylight.
They enter Orikhiv. They fly into Orikhiv and maybe even a bit further, but mostly they fly over Orikhiv. They look for equipment, and even if they don't find any, they just fire randomly. Now they're just firing anywhere.
Whether civilian or military, for the enemy, it's all a target. The huge number of drones in the Orikhiv direction is changing the course of the war.
By 100. The amount of fiber has increased by 100%. There is a lot more fiber now. Plus, strike aircraft have appeared. They're very widespread, like the Molnia, and even more advanced versions of the Molnia are now being widely used. As for the infantry overall, their infantrymen are quite well trained. They know how to operate under electronic warfare conditions, under FPV drone threats. They're generally well prepared. In other words, the enemy is evolving and learning from experience.
Previously, the life of the infantry depended on artillery. Now it depends on drone pilots.
Our task, our mission, is to prevent the enemy from advancing toward our infantry.
These 2 guys work as a team. They monitor both the sky and the ground, search for the enemy and destroy them with drone drops.
They like to come in on ATVs, they like to come in on ATVs on motorcycles in small groups so they can stay mobile. But they haven't been successful because of various FPV and Mavic drone teams. We detected them even as they were approaching, and they were destroyed in front of our positions.
Before the Easter truce, the pilots and artillery repelled a powerful assault by an entire enemy battalion using vehicles. Everything was burned, but the enemy still tries to move forward, using each new lull as cover.
There were shellings, so no one really observed any kind of strong truce. They came out of the tree lines, tried to bring up ammunition, and attempted to deliver supplies closer to our positions. We spotted them and simply scared them off so they wouldn't approach our positions.
Maxim's partner is old enough to be his father and learns all the secrets from the younger pilots. In war, the difference in age is erased.
You have children the same age as these guys, so I don't feel it. Everything's fine. I say, I feel just like them when I'm with them.
The hardest thing is working in the fog. In such conditions, you can't see anything and there are no landmarks. It's in this kind of weather that the enemy moves out to launch assaults. Because of the constant tension and staring at monitors, almost all the pilots already have eye problems. However, there's no one to replace them. There just aren't enough people.
Of course, there aren't enough people. From a technological standpoint, there's also a noticeable shortage of drones right now. In fact, even the Mavics themselves are in short supply these days.
The enemy hunts these fighters both day and night. That's why the positions are carefully camouflaged.
24/7.
Our pilots spend 24/7 underground. For most people, sunlight is normal, but for our guys it's a luxury because going outside even once more than necessary means putting yourself in danger. Enemy pilots and enemy artillery are constantly searching for the pilot's location, so no one goes to the surface unless absolutely necessary. All the fields around are pockmarked with craters from enemy artillery strikes. On top of that, the enemy has started dropping chemical munitions.
They drop them, throw grenades, and FPV drones are flying around. Recently, they dropped gas on a neighboring position. Every day, mortar fire rains down, artillery too, and if you stay here a little longer, you'll also hear the grads. 3 ranging shots, then half a cassette. If you see all those little dots near the tree lines, that's all near the tree lines, near us, near the infantry. They shell everywhere. But we're ready for this, we're used to it. We do our job, we're motivated, we're defending our land.
After unsuccessful offensives, the enemy started dressing up in civilian clothes in Robotine and pretending to be civilians. Our pilots immediately saw through the enemy. I observed this kind of situation myself.
We observed a situation where the enemy disguised themselves as civilians, as if they lived there, just sitting around like civilians, and behind the house there was a mortar. And before that, this mortar had been firing at our troops, at our infantry. We detected it and destroyed it. That's why they disguise themselves as civilians. But in reality, they're soldiers. You can tell they're young, you can see they're strong.
A 28-year-old pilot who used to work at a cement plant now protects the skies for our infantry in the Orikhiv direction. The aircraft has returned from reconnaissance. Now it's time for the bomber to go to work. Somewhere in the tree line, an enemy infantryman was spotted.
It's very difficult to hit equipment with a grenade. This grenade, we're preparing it against infantry.
Without sleep or sunlight, under constant artillery shelling and airstrikes. These crews protect the lives of our infantry even at the cost of their own. That's all for today, but very soon, Front News will bring you new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Timoshenko. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.